Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Office 365 Hours. I'm your host. My name is Norman Young. I'm coming to you from a very overcast and cold Canada. I'm the Director of Collaborative Analytics at AvePoint with a focus on tyGraph, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. Joining me today is Daniel Glenn. Daniel
Hello.
is the Senior Director of Hybrid Office and U.S. Operations at Creospark. That is a mouthful. That sounds like a very
Yes.
important job title.
Well, I
Dan,
don't, I don't know. I don't know about that, Norm. Yours seemed longer than mine. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. But no, I have a great job in enabling organizations to utilize their technology like Viva Connections
wow.
to really engage their employees. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here as well. There's a few things that our wonderful audience may not know about you, Daniel.
Oh,
One of which is that you are a seven-time Microsoft 365 Apps and Services MVP. You've been around a
se-
while.
seven. Well, thanks, I guess. That no, it is. I'm very proud of that award. It just really just means being involved, and you know this as well, being involved in the community and helping those around us learn about the technology and how it can help them. So I'm really, like I said, I'm honored to be an MVP and to work closely with Microsoft on existing technology, but new things that are coming too.
Absolutely. It's always nice to give back. And
Mhm.
I also understand that you're involved in the tech community in Tennessee. What are you doing there?
Yeah, I have led the Microsoft 365 user group for quite a while. And back when it was actually the SharePoint user group, and then the Office 365, and now Microsoft 365. And I also lead an event that some in may know about these types of events, which are 1 day kind of conferences free that you can show up and just get your learn on,
Mhm.
called Microsoft 365 Nashville. So and I do some other stuff, but that's not important. I just know that I do love being involved in the community and helping start communities in other cities as well. So it really is a passion of mine.
That is fantastic. And it's always nice to be a member of the community, to learn from others, but to give back as well. You
Yeah,
also have a show on your own, don't you? With
I do.
yeah, tell us more about
Yes.
that.
Yes, thanks for mentioning it. I do have a podcast every week. We go live on YouTube with my co-host Daryl Webster, who's in Auckland, New Zealand, and the show's called the 365 Message Center Show. And basically, we just cover all of the new stuff that's coming for everyone in their Microsoft 365 tenants, and tell you if it's important or not, and
Mhm.
what you need to prepare for. So you can find us at 365mcs.com to get connected with the show.
It's a great show. I've watched it, try to watch it as I can, and there's so much change that it's hard to know
Mhm.
what's important and what's not important to follow. Uh,
Yes.
we're inundated with all of the message center stuff, and we try and stay on top of it. But we also get all of these new application releases, throughout the year, whether it's Ignite, Inspire, or the other types of events where there's just this deluge of new things that we need to learn about and follow about. And that's kind of why we're here today.
Mhm.
Today, let's talk about Viva Connections.
Mm.
And more importantly, how can we boost our intranet's engagement if we use Viva Connections? So why don't you get us started and tell us about Viva Connections for those who don't know?
Yes, Viva Connections is the that first app from the Viva platform. That we you probably are familiar with all of the announcements you were talking about that have been announced recently. In fact, of Viva, it's expanding, but Viva Connections is the original member, and Viva Connections is really that one place to connect with news that's going on in your organization and resources that are available. It's yes, it's bringing in your intranet into Teams because Viva Connections is a Teams app, but it is more than that because of the additional functionality and that you get with Viva Connections. So basic. It's a Teams app, but
Hmm.
um, and so bringing that information into your employees where they're working, right, where
Where
we're
they're
meeting,
working.
where we're chatting, where we're collaborating with others in the organization.
Interesting, because for the longest time, early days of Microsoft Teams, it was Teams is your hub for teamwork.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see it in its practical application where the well thought out intranet is coming right into where people are working within Teams. And I guess the idea
Indeed.
there is to bring the content, to bring the engagement, to bring all of that back to where employees are working. And it's interesting because I sometimes find myself not being too fussed about applications in Teams. I came up doing everything in a separate browser session, but not everyone's like that. And
No.
having that single unified experience that's not too overwhelming at my left rail makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
uh, I'm very happy to see something as important as the internet exposed in such a way. And so how are, based on your experience, how are organizations using Viva Connections to boost engagement?
Yeah, it does it in several ways, really. It enables you to, for those that are on CorpCom, it brings the brand in. So, that colors, an icon, name, logos, all of that for your organization, bringing that into your app and within Teams for your intranet. But really the engagement starts with that employee experience. And we're not only rolling up content, we're targeting content,
Mm,
bringing that content that's relevant to you. And it's not just news either. And it's not just documents, it's also links and those teams that are relevant to you, those resources that are relevant to you. And it's tailored so that, when we think about intranet classic back in the day, a lot of that was here's what it is, and it's that way for everybody.
right.
And there was some things you could do targeting, yes, but it was a lot of intranets were the same for everyone. And uh, I think that's not the modern experience, the way that really people need to engage with content. They need to engage with content that means things to them, that is meaningful, I
Right.
guess, to them. So being able to, I think the marketing, what Microsoft has said many times about it is kind of your intelligent intranet, but and that's fine. I feel that the highlights there is the tailored experience, really simplifying that experience for your users, because with Viva Connections, we get that global navigation
Hmm.
that not only is navigation, okay, yes, great. Navigation for your intranet is brought in through the app, but it's also bringing you news that's relevant to you in that navigation, your content that is relevant to you in that navigation of for Viva Connections. So again, personalization, but also bringing that content and making it available so that you can engage with it. And then we're not talking about Yammer in this time together, but intranets integrating with Yammer and bringing those Yammer conversations in as well. Part of our Viva Connections experience is another way, right, that we can engage with our employees.
Interesting. And when we think of SharePoint prior to Viva Connections and the modern internet, and you would visit the place and you would search for the
Yeah,
thing. And yes,
right.
audience targeting existed, news existed, all of these things existed before, but it seems like there's a shift now where it's less about the organization's information assets that might sit inside the
Mm,
internet, but more towards being delivered information specifically to
yeah,
the employee. So now it's more about how the employee experiences SharePoint than maybe a user just coming to SharePoint to find those things. So audience
indeed.
targeting, yeah, this is something that we've heard before, but it almost is like Viva Connections is forcing a new level of maturity in how organizations are targeting content to try and drive engagement. And let's face it, we through the pandemic, who wasn't feeling isolated and
Yeah.
disconnected? So maybe this is a way that can help do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. Let me take what you were just talking about. I think I just saw a survey yesterday, results from a nationwide survey that was talking about how people spend their time. And even now, it's not just the pandemic. The pandemic kind of kickstarted it. But even now, people are spending more time alone than they are with other people.
Hmm,
Still, okay. I mean, it's drastic. The graph I saw it was drastic. Um, so, you know, having that engagement experience, I think, is going to help. I'm not saying it's going to solve the world's problems. Let's be realistic here.
right,
But for inside the organization, having that information available to everyone and making it right there in front of them, but also then engaging with others. Remember, we're not leaving teams, right?
right.
We're in teams. We can engage with others. We engage on content with others straight there. So I think that is how we can, let's focus on that engagement with each other, not just with content. Okay.
Right.
Um, so and then, when we're talking about that tailored experience, it's not just, oh, I got to think about what audience would like this and what audience would like, this item. Microsoft is also using AI and the Microsoft Graph behind the scenes to look at who you collaborate with most and then showing content maybe that you have access to. It's all security trimmed and everything,
Hmm.
but content that they're creating. And if you're working with them a lot, they're on your team, then that content may be relevant to you as well. And those kind of decisions and others, there's a lot that go into that and factor into it. But those kind of that kind of information and those inputs making that content even more relevant than just, remembering, oh, I need to target this to this
Right,
audience
right.
based on a location or something, right? So it's even more than that.
So besides the Teams icon that we've talked about, are there other components to Viva Connections that people need to be aware of?
Oh, absolutely. And we haven't even talked about the one that I'm most excited about, which is the Viva dashboard.
Ah,
Um, and because when when we were back in the day, I mean, I've been building SharePoint intranets on-prem for years. My first SharePoint farm was version 1. Okay.
wow.
So I've been building them for a while. And we get into this modern experience, and some would say, especially developers, they look at it and go, I can't do anything. Right? There's no custom master page. For those that have been in you might have some chills when I say that. There's the customization is lower that you can do, the amount that you can do, which is actually a good thing, people.
Mm,
But what you can do is use ACEs, which are adaptive cards on the Viva dashboard on your intranet that gives integrations to other systems or build your own app inside that.
ah,
So that, for me and for my organization, we are seeing engagement there, of, hey, I want to connect to this other system, or I want to showcase the weather or stock,
right.
simple things like that. But then even more complex things, like an employee experience for days off, their vacation schedule, the holiday schedule. I mean,
Right.
just all these kind of things. There's
Yeah.
so many that we've developed already for clients, that dashboard is what I'm really excited about, because that's where you do customization. That's where you can get your programming hat on and get your employees not only engaged with content in your intranet, right, but engagement outside of your intranet, within Viva Connections and within Teams. So that, I think, um, is where focusing on that, getting the right content, the right features there, um, is key to adoption and engagement for your employees.
The, the cards sound really amazing. Not just the link to the vacation schedule or the vacation requester, but
Right.
a smart adaptive card that recognizes
Mhm.
who you are and pushes your information to you.
Absolutely. And
And I
they're
imagine
targetable, right?
they're
I mean,
targetable.
yeah, so you can even target these just like you can other content. So yeah, absolutely. There's great power there.
It sounds it, and I could see how employees or users of the internet would be more engaged if you can see the things that matter most to you.
Indeed.
Payroll, time off, the things that are important, maybe outstanding tasks and other items.
Yeah,
So,
but let me address one thing though, Norm.
sure.
I, a huge pitfall that I'm seeing people have with intranets, not just now with bringing their internet and Viva connections, but for many years, and it's still happening, is this idea that you can set it and forget it,
Mm,
and it's just simply not true, because the reason why it's a huge pitfall is it causes problems in multiple ways. One, for projects, getting your internet going, you think you have to get it perfect, right?
right.
Because you're going to set it and you're going to walk away and do something else. That's not the way it needs to work. It can be a version 1, version 2, and these things can happen quickly. Those changes can happen. Eh, Let's go back to the dashboard real quick. You don't have to go, okay, what are all of my systems I want to integrate with? I've got to develop 20 cards, to put on this dashboard, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. You can start with 2,
Right.
right? And then add them on as you go. So it causes that problem of getting started, making it perfect. Perfect is the enemy
Mm,
of done.
yeah.
So, and then it also, the set it, forget it, making sure that that information there is not stale. It causes a problem there as well. So
Right.
that's a big pitfall that I see with organizations. Make sure you don't have to have it perfect. Let's launch the thing with what we have now, and then we can add on later. What better engagement and getting people excited than, hey, we've got a new ACE that allows you to request time off directly in the intranet. And we're going to launch that, in a couple months, right, or
Yes.
in a month's time, right? So just make sure that you don't think of it as set it, forget it, because it does cause ripple effects in thinking and the way you not only implement but use your intranet.
Sage advice. An intranet is not a one and done, as you said. It's an extension of the company. It's
Yeah.
an extension of the company's beliefs and values and knowledge management and so on. So it's going to need that
Mhm.
ongoing investment. And do you find that with Viva Connections that organizations are having to spend more time planning the intranet or planning how they're going to roll out Viva Connections? Because the two are
I,
so connected.
they are connected, but it's not that difficult. Honestly, I mean, the way we plan and get started with Viva Connections is actually with your intranet. Um, Getting going with Viva Connect, there's definitely some things you need to think about. The dashboard being one of those, and your navigation. But when it comes down to it, you're going to need to plan your intranet. So we plan our intranet, and then once we launch, we're going to focus on content, right? We're
Right.
going to focus on creating news that is exciting, engaging, getting your corp com, getting HR, getting others that are involved that on how to engage with content. So you're going to focus on content and allow collaboration off of your intranet and on those team sites. You're going to just foster that as you move forward, and then adding new dashboard cards or new parts of the intranet.
Hmm.
Great, right? But focus on the intranet. So the steps really to get started with Viva Connections is to get started with your intranet.
Right.
So creating and designing that home site. And let me just pause right for a second. Home site is, yes, it's your intranet and your home, quote unquote, but it's actual a specific designation in your SharePoint environment in Microsoft 365 to say this site is my home site.
Right.
And so when you say that, that's when that site will then be in Viva Connections. Okay. And that's how you get that experience to show up in Viva Connections. But then, and it is also an organizational news source. I won't go into that very
Right.
much, but when you do that, that's what happens. And then you configure the navigation you want to show up in the app bar. That's going to be part of your navigation in Viva Connections. work on those dashboard cards, get those, the way you want them to be. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and you can just run with one or two if you have to.
Right.
And then you deploy Viva Connections, which is just a Teams app. But the key here is to test it. And you can do that. You can roll out the app to a targeted audience. So
Mhm.
only a certain group of users sees the app in Teams. Only they will experience it initially. You can get some feedback. And don't forget to test on mobile
Uba.
because, because the experience in the Teams app for is great for Viva Connections. Make sure you have your users testing it. What does it look like, and how can you make it better? But then the rest is focus on the intranet, right? Roll it
Right.
out to everyone else, the Teams app, and then focus on the intranet. Focus on your news. Focus on your links. Focus on announcements and fostering your communities. And you can kind of forget about Viva Connections, other than those dashboard cards, and your navigation if you want to change that here, in time. But those are simple steps.
Right. Know your content,
Mhm.
know your people, and then try to marry the two up.
Yeah,
It's
and don't forget about data. I love seeing intranets with reports, and so focusing on a little bit on data, I think is great for people to see that engagement too. So it's not just about news, but yeah, know your people, and know the content, know the news that's happening, know what's happening, and what kind of environment that you want to foster for your employees.
right. It sounds like it's a mix of technical and content. Um,
100%.
and how do you see governance being uh, managed for organizations that are successfully deploying Viva Connection? Does one group like IT own Viva Connections or the internet versus the Marcoms type people?
No, I and I kind of glossed over and didn't mention governance, but governance should be a conversation you're having at the beginning.
Mhm.
Okay, so this involves IT, but it also involves other departments that are going to be inputting and using the internet. So that means kind of everybody, everybody that you can get. And governance, some people think that's a dirty word. Um, to me, my definition of governance is answers to the question of who, what, when, where, and why.
Right.
So it is not a set of rules. It's a answering the question of how do I use this? Who uses this? When should I do this versus that? Answering those type of questions, right? And making sure that simple, right? Who posts news on the internet?
Right.
What if I want to get a news item added to the internet? What is the process? Right? Simple questions like that.
Simple.
Um, I I go through with my clients those questions of let's make sure we understand that, and then publish it. Make sure everyone knows what those processes are, what the answers are. And so governance doesn't have to be this 100-page document that's
Hmm.
set in stone. It's another living thing that you're going to come up and go, wait, we didn't address that. We need to address it. Or we need to change the way we think about this. Maybe instead of only these two people publish news, maybe we need to allow everyone to create news. And then there's a procedure for approving it. Right.
Right.
Or maybe these departments, we should bubble up their news, but not these other departments. And so you can make tweaks along the way, but make sure you do it. Make sure you have governance, and answer those questions so that it will make your life easier down the road. But IT typically shouldn't own, quote unquote, the internet. Okay. We're typically now, there's asterisks on everything, right,
Sure, of
Norm?
course.
But IT is focused on delivering technology, not usually focused on engaging employees with
Right.
information, right? And so IT should be an enabler, but I like to see corp com. I like to see the communications. I like to see HR. I like to see other teams involved and having ownership of the intranet, and whether it's the whole thing or parts of getting engaged so that their employees are engaged because they know their departments, they know the people. So it's a team effort. It's not just,
Right.
one siloed thing.
And that's the hard part, is the
Hmm.
team part.
It is.
You wish you could code up or develop governance, or you wish you could go off, pull something off the shelf and buy governance. But the truth is, it has to be meaningful conversations that reflect how an organization works. And it's not just for Viva Connections,
No,
it's for any product. And so,
indeed.
in your experience, what are some of the common pitfalls that people face when trying to deploy Viva Connections?
Well, we just talked about one, and that's governance. Because I think if you get started without governance, thinking about answering those questions, if you don't do that, then you're going to be fumbling about trying to answer those questions as you deploy or after you deploy, and not knowing, and people just don't know how to use it or get content published. It's better to have those answers before. We talked about the whole set it, forget it.
Right.
Don't do that. Um, but I think also the another pitfall with Viva Connections is thinking it's something more than what we just talked about. Um, it is a great tool, but focus on the intranet. Don't focus on, I've seen organizations spend many hours trying to come up with an icon, that they want the app to have in
Sure.
Teams, when they should have been focusing on the navigation or focusing on creating a dashboard card that's meaningful. And I don't. You don't have to work with me. You don't have to come to me and say, Daniel, help us with our internet. But um, I think a big pitfall, that the last one I'll mention, is not working with people who have done this before.
Right.
They're work with a partner to at least go through governance. If you
Right.
have the technology people to do this, great, but at least work with a partner on governance. But if you don't have a team that can deploy this, work with a partner to do it right. It doesn't have to be expensive at all, and it doesn't have to take a whole long time either. But work with somebody that's done this before, and don't spin your wheels and with fumbling about. That's
Right.
yeah.
And if you were in an organization that wanted to get started with Viva Connections, how would you start?
Well, hopefully they're watching this episode and they can get some pointers. I think we talked about at the beginning of being involved with the community.
Right.
Conferences are a great way to learn.
Yes.
Go to a workshop. I'm about to actually do a workshop on Viva Connections and Viva Engage, and so that if they were to join a workshop like that or a session, there's some great learnings on learn.microsoft.com. For getting information about Viva Connections and getting started. And some of it's technical and some of it's not, right?
Right.
So I think that's great as well. And then the last one I'd say is reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you, whether you're a client or not, and give you some tips. So reach out to me, or love to get you started.
That's very generous of you to make that offer, Daniel. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate all your insights with Viva
Sure.
Connections, but not only that, but the broader governance story, SharePoint, and how we can use a tool like Viva Connections to start to increase our employee engagement in this post-pandemic world where, quite honestly, a lot of us are disconnected and isolated. And this is not a tool that fixes everything, but this sure does help if it's done right.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time, Daniel.
No, thank you, Norm. I appreciate it.
Uh, Folks, thanks for joining in. Please join us. We're live every other Wednesday. Have a great day and thanks for watching.